I'm Steve Arvistow. I'm Executive Director for Big Sky Economic Development. We're very excited to kind of be the host location for the Partnership to Fuel America. In just a bit, I'm going to turn this over to John Brewer, who's going to kind of introduce the program, and he'll be introducing our speakers this morning. But what we'd like to start with, I've got a couple of comments that I want to share regarding why you being here today to talk about energy is the right place for you to have that conversation in Billings, Montana. I'll share that perspective with you in just a second. But let's go around the room and introduce ourselves very quickly so we all know who we are and who our neighbor is, and then we can have a good casual conversation today. So Kendall, we'll start with you.
Excuse me, I'm Kendall McRae with Synergy Station.
I'm Laura McRae with Synergy Station.
John Brewer with the Billings Chamber of Commerce Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Bruce McIntyre, Billings Chamber of Commerce Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Dan Carter, MSU Billings.
Bob Carr, Relations Trading.
Regina Demas, Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch.
Robert Dorff, KTVQ.
Hi, I'm Ron Yates. I'm a tax accountant with Daily.
I'm Ed Bartlett. I'm a lobbyist for a number of folks, including the city, the county, and the Billings Chambers.
I'm Clarence Reederson, the Montana Biofund. And I'm Debbie Singer with Northwestern Energy.
Good morning, Josh May with Energy Job Solutions. And I'm Chad Lilly, also with UJS.
Sherry T, South Black Insurance Company.
Chris Westphal, Energy Job Solutions.
Mark Mueller, Executive Energy.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Hamill, Mayor for the City of Billings.
Good morning, John Austin, County Commissioner.
And Angela David Conflict.
Christopher Booth, U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Ken Herman, Powder River Transportation Service.
Mike Marshmith on Claims and WorkSafe MT.
Stacy Thompson with the Partnership to Fuel America.
Evelyn Clyburn, Big Sky Business Journal.
Thank you all again for Stacy, your partner ran out. So tell us who she is, who's helping you set this up today.
Oh, my coworker Jen. Yeah.
So we'll consider her welcome also. Yes, she's busy this morning. Well, Billings really is the right place for this conversation today. I was doing a little bit of research just in the context of how important energy is to our community. It's a big deal for us here in Billings, Montana, so it's great to have you here. This being one of your stops on many stops, as you were describing to me, Matt. But I was doing some reading. The oil and gas industry asked Dr. Scott Ricker, a local economist, to do an analysis of the economic impact of just oil and gas on Yellowstone County. And here's what he said very quickly. Yellowstone County's oil and gas industry is significant in both size and scope. From exploration of new energy supplies to retail sales of gasoline, thousands of local households are employed by the industry and many thousands more by the additional local spending that county oil and gas firms generate. And then he gave some specifics. If you just think about refining in our area, 950 workers are directly employed with our 3 refineries. Their average compensation for these positions is over $100,000 per year. And those 950 folks directly working for the refineries then represent another 7,000 related jobs in our economy. And that's just refining. So if you look at it in total, according to Dr. Rickard, Yellowstone County's oil and gas industry directly employs over 3,500 workers, paying $248 million in employee compensation. And then add to that an additional 8,600 jobs that are likely supported and a part of that economy, just of oil and gas. Then add coal, then add power generation and distribution. Energy is a big deal for us. So to have you here today to talk about this partnership to fuel America is really important to us, and we welcome you and thank you for coming and being a part of the Billings community today. I'll turn it over to John Brewer and we'll get the program started. Thank you.
Energy is a big deal to us. We're glad you're here, Matt and Christopher. Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, Consulate General, thank you for being here this morning. I've been involved with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for a number of years now, serving on a number of committees as well as just actively involved in number of their initiatives, and energy is a very important part of their strategy, and we are very appreciative of what they're doing on a national scale. The U.S. Chamber said recently that shale energy has the potential to be an economic game changer for our nation. I don't think that is an overstatement at all. It's a significant path for job creation, as we all know. I'm very pleased to introduce Matt today. Matt Cook is the Vice President at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Institute for 21st Century Energy. Matt is responsible for leading the Institute's efforts to promote and expand support for the development of North American energy resources. Before joining the Chamber, Matt was Director of Federal Relations at the American Petroleum Institute, where he was their Chief Advocate and Issue Manager for all downstream and refining-related issues affecting the oil and natural gas industry. Matt served in George W. Bush administration in the White House Office of Cabinet Affairs and at the U.S. Department of Energy. Matt resides in Falls Church, Virginia with his wife and 2 sons, and he enjoys coaching and still playing ice hockey. Matt, possibly the only thing more politically driven than energy is that of being involved as a parent in youth sports. So, we're glad you're here. At your desk, you'll also see a copy of the Billings Chamber's energy policy and our top priorities as they relate to helping the energy industry grow, as well as supporting communities that are being impacted by this. So, again, Matt, Christopher, we're glad you're here. Thank you.
So thanks for having us. We have a pretty robust little program here, so I'm going to move quickly through a few slides so that we can get to both Christopher and Stan. As mentioned, I've been at the Chamber for about a year and a half. I work for the Institute for 21st Century Energy. We're an organization that was built by the U.S. Chamber to be a separate institute, somewhat separate from the Chamber, so that we could go out and promote common sense energy solutions. About 5 years ago, a number of Chamber members had recognized that energy was continuing to rise up as a top issue for them across all business sectors, whether you're in the energy industry or whether you're in some finance industry or some other transportation-related industry. That energy was touching all businesses and had more and more concern, and really felt that the Chamber had to have a more focused voice on promoting common sense energy solutions. So the Institute was formed, and we promote, again, a common sense business program related to energy and towards the use of all forms of energy. There's it's been, you hear thrown around Washington a lot lately that we need an all the above energy strategy, and some people will say that, some politicians will say that that means everything above the ground but not below the ground, and we believe that we need all of it. And it's not just oil and gas, that's my background, but we also need coal, and we also promote the use of nuclear energy. But in that mix, we need renewables. We promote that and the need for efficiencies as well. So, but with that, and along that theme, I was asked to help design and build this campaign called the Partnership to Fuel America. And we're recognizing in the midst of what's going on in this part of the country, as well as what's going on in Pennsylvania, and all over sorts of the country with mixed policy priorities, and with the need to talk more and more about the innovations that were happening and the benefits of that in the energy sector, as well as to other sectors and different communities. That in addition, we have this great relationship with Canada. We have a great trade relationship with Canada. We bring a lot of energy down, and we have for a number of years. And we needed to start to promote and educate people about its importance. And so we built this partnership. We've targeted a number of different states to identify businesses and industries that recognize the importance of Canadian energy, not only our energy security, but to the job benefits here in the United States. There's about 80,000 Americans today working to build and manufacture goods and services that go up to Canada on a daily basis. And there's tremendous benefit to us, tremendous benefit to jobs. Your state in particular has a refinery here right here in Billings that's receiving a lot of oil from Canada, as well as a lot of jobs of manufacturing that's going up to Canada. The benefits are beyond just the jobs and business economic benefits, but also the energy security benefits. For every barrel of oil that we produce in Canada, every barrel of oil we produce here in the United States is one less that we have to bring in from a country that doesn't have our best interests in mind. And Christopher, I know we'll talk a little more about them, and Stan will as well, but there's tremendous opportunity there to start to, particularly as these innovations are happening with shale oil and things, to start to move away from Canadian or from imports from other countries in the Middle East in particular. But also for every, and Stan will get into this, for every barrel of oil, for every dollar spent importing oil from Canada, 90 cents of return benefit comes back to the United States from the goods and services that we're purchasing here in our country. I was just at a in situ oil sands plant, which is a newer method for developing oil sands. Very innovative. They don't mine it anymore. They're using directional drilling like they do for oil development here, and then using steam, they're able to separate the oil from the sand beneath the ground now and get it out of the ground that way rather than mining it. And it's very innovative. We were at this brand new plant just last year with our CEO and asked the question, how much of pipes and all those, the hardware and the capital investment in this $3.5 billion plant came from the United States? He said about 85%. And that's tremendous. Caterpillar's largest market is still Alberta. There's great big Caterpillar trucks and great big tires, and they're all built here in the United States, as well as coveralls and gloves and all those sorts of things. So, in 80,000 jobs in about 49 different states. So, we're going to continue to promote that at the Chamber. We're going to continue to promote that in addition to the domestic development that we need to start looking more to this partner in the North. So, we're in 11 states. We felt it was important to educate businesses in these states and get them engaged. We felt that the network would be important to build this partnership to get businesses more involved in advocacy, to get them smarter on energy issues, and not just businesses that are in the energy sector, but businesses across sectors who are working with energy companies, are recognizing the benefits and understand the need for energy security. The states in the Midwest we identified initially were because there's a lot of oil sands going down there right now and going to the refineries and meeting the market demands. The states up here, for the same reason, that you have some new oil coming down, but you also see the pipeline benefits. We'll get to talk about Keystone just in a minute. The donut hole in the middle is Iowa, because we decided not to go to Iowa, because everybody goes into Iowa and spends a lot of money in politics, and there's a lot of noise, and we don't need to be lost in that noise and getting involved and devoting a lot of resources to that. But we started here, and we hope to continue to expand. We've had a few members from other states, people who've heard us or recognized or found us on the web and have joined the partnership. So we're broadening our voice. We currently have, as of, that was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had 289 members. We recognize that in a year we've found close to 300 members, but because the chambers and the economic development organizations, because of the employees that you represent and you work with, and the ability for, as business leaders, to reach into the community and talk to other people, that our reach is far beyond that. We have a lot of, in Montana, in addition to the organizations mentioned, that we have the Montana Chamber, the Retail Association, the Hospitality Association, a whole number of different organizations that have joined our partnership and recognize the need for energy development both here and as well as the relationship with Canada. So here's just a few sample, but it gives you an understanding. I love being able to go on these talk shows and they ask me about astroturfing. These are all fake, and I'm like, no, you can call any of them. They'll tell you they've joined. And we have Rowdy Steakhouse in Nebraska is one of my favorites. But it's right along the pipeline route. They're one of the first people to sign up because they said, we need those workers coming here and buy steak. So, just real quick on the Keystone Pipeline, I think most of you are familiar with the route. We felt that the Chamber was a no-brainer for us to just back this project, a $7 billion investment, 1,600 miles of pipeline, bringing about 800,000 barrels of oil in a day. In addition, just as importantly, is near Baker, there's an on-ramp that will be built, a $100 million investment to bring crude from this area into that pipeline. In Oklahoma, they've already started to build this past summer, despite the delay. They decided to move forward on the southern portion of this pipeline route because they didn't need a permit for that, to try to relieve some of the flood of oil that's in Oklahoma. So there's benefits to a domestic well as well. I think for Baker, you can put about 65,000 barrels a day out of that pipeline, and you're looking at a few $1 million of economic benefit annually just from sales tax or from property taxes along those counties in that area. So tremendous residual benefit. We have a lot of partners in places like South Dakota, Nebraska, where we can join. who recognize just not the immediate benefits, but small counties of 4,000 people that are going to see $250,000 in increased tax revenue. That means a lot to them. These are very small budgets, and they're going to be able to build the schools that they need and the roads that they need, and that means an additional benefit to contractors and builders in that area and all the other sorts of things that that brings. Just quickly, I'm bringing a status update. As you know, the president was forced to make a decision earlier this year on the pipeline permit. The pipeline permit had been requested 3.5 years prior. We've gone through 3 environmental impact statements, and with a very conclusive impact statement that came out in August of 2011 that said that the pipeline would be a very minimal risk, and in fact, building the pipeline would be of lower risk than not building the pipeline to the environment. But Congress passed legislation in December that said he had to make a decision by the end of February, or the pipeline permit would be granted immediately automatically. So President Obama rejected the pipeline over concerns about that were voiced about some environmental areas, environmentally sensitive areas in Nebraska. In February, TransCanada said they were going to work on that southern portion, as I mentioned. They were going to go ahead and start that anyway. And then in May, they resubmitted a new application that said they'd work with the state of Nebraska resolving some of those issues with regard to the route in that state. So they worked all summer and come up with had public hearings and public meetings and worked with the state DEQ and followed a new process that had been put in place and have now settled on a route. The state DEQ is completing the review and expect to have the recommended route on the governor's desk sometime any day, any week now. And then what will happen is the governor would then make a decision with TransCanada and announce whether we're going to move forward with pushing this new route forward to the administration, or the governor may say he wants to have some more work on it, but we're expecting that they should be fine because of the process that they went through with working with the state. The President Obama has, as he had in the past, has said he doesn't want to make a decision on this until spring of next year. He wants to postpone the decision. We've been continuing to voice that we need to have this decision made sooner, that there's a lot of jobs and a lot of energy security at stake, so we continue to promote in the chamber that needs to put forward a plan. And we're going to continue to do that. So what we're going to continue to do as well is communicate to you about the need for common sense energy policy. We're going to continue to ask if you're interested in joining, with many of you have already, partnership to be willing to be voices within your communities, to talk to your employees, and talk to fellow business people, to be a resource for them, but also allow us to be a resource for you. We're here to help you out. If you need information on energy issues, if you need speakers for events, we're happy to help. We want to also be a resource for you to enable to help you communicate to your legislators. So we don't have a heavy hand. We don't ask for a whole lot. I can try to send out some information on timely issues that might be happening across the country to keep you informed of what might be happening in Pennsylvania or Ohio, or what might be happening in Washington. We try to, we won't sign your name to anything. We won't sign anything as the partnership that may be associated with your name as possible. But we just ask that you be a resource. We think it's important to build this business network and increase voices across the country. And so if you haven't had a chance to join yet, please do so. But for whatever reason, if you have any other questions or anything we can help you with, let us help you out and communicate to us. And we're here to help you. You're sitting in a tremendous position here, and as you mentioned, there's already great benefits that are happening in Billings and different parts of the state from some of the oil and gas development. But I think that take the opportunity to have you be able to speak those to not only your legislators here, but to other legislators in Washington, and communicate it to other business people in other parts of the country. We're happy to help you do that, and we're hoping to continue to build this partnership. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christopher, who's going to talk about some things that are happening in the energy sector, both here and globally, but also what's happening with particularly shale oil and shale gas, and then Stan will come up and talk about Canada. And then we'll hopefully have a chance for some conversations and questions. Thank you.
Hopefully, of course, we'll have time. I know people need to run out. Businesses to go run. I will try to get through this quick enough that we can foster some of that conversation. Matt just discussed the partnership with America as well as the Keystone Pipeline. I'm going to take a little bit of broader step out, add some, I guess, diversity in the conversation. to hit on some of the other aspects that the chamber really focuses on. Quickly, we'll just go through sort of a large swath of where we are. So ultimately, where we are is a very precarious position, which is to say we don't really know where we are from a federal policy perspective. At this point, the federal policy is more or less a de facto no policy. I would certainly argue that's not a bad thing, because that means the federal government's not necessarily intruding as much as they perhaps could. And to some extent, I think it's fair to say it's important to remember that there are limitations to what the federal government can do by way of energy policy. You hear a lot of people say, you know, I'll go all the way back to President Nixon. We need to get ourselves off of this addiction to oil. We need to have national energy policy. We need to have a Marshall Plan. We need to have an Apollo project. The federal government can't do a lot of that. I mean, thankfully, our Constitution creates a system of federalism. And that allows the states, and to some extent collaboration between the states, to come up with their own policies. And that's useful, because what happens in Montana is much different than what happens in my home state of California, which is much different than what happens in Florida. Each state has different resources, and it's very difficult for the federal government to steer the country towards any one of those things. There's goods and bads to that. The bad is that you end up with the least efficient use of our resources to some extent, but the good is that they can't necessarily tell a state, you can't use renewables here, or obviously to some extent they can tell you you can't use coal, because we've seen coal plants closed up here. But that's because we as a nation decided that clean air was important, and this EPA has decided that they're going to use it as a sword to try and topple the head of the coal industry. Right now there's a lot of uncertainty. Future of oil exploration, it's great, but that's because it shifted from federal lands to private lands. Natural gas is having profound impacts, of which the federal government and Congress is just starting to kind of comprehend. Nuclear, now that's something that does rely a little bit more on the federal government, because as a matter of its safe regulation, it's controlled by the federal government. But frankly, it's more about the market. Right now, the prospects for new nuclear builds in this country are pretty slim. It has nothing to do with Fukushima. It has nothing to do with public perception. It has everything to do with, number two, the fact that natural gas has flooded the market, and that in the power sector, it's, for the first time in probably ever, but certainly in the last few decades, it's much, much cheaper to generate energy by burning natural gas than it is by fissioning atoms. Now, over the course of 60 years, it's probably still going to be cheaper for nuclear power, but Wall Street doesn't look at 60 years, they look at 60 seconds. And so right now, if you're a utility and you want to embrace nuclear power, you're going to get hammered by the financial industries. So we're building two new facilities right now, one in Georgia and one in South Carolina. First time in 30 years, we started to build new nuclear power plants. So that's a big step. That's a good step. But 4 years ago, we were talking about the potential for 30 new plants in the next 10 years. That's not happening. And again, it's because of natural gas, not because of public perception or anything else. Coal, obviously, most of the rest of the country doesn't understand that this is coal country. Everyone thinks about Appalachia, but if you look at where coal comes from, more of it comes from up here in places like North Dakota, Montana, and especially Wyoming and anywhere else in the rest of the country. Texans like to think that everything comes from Texas, and they do well with coal, but it's not like it is up here. But we're at a big crossroads now. What I'm about to, I'll show you that we have massive, probably even more than most people realize, supplies of coal in this country. But EPA has now said that we cannot build a coal-fired power plant, period. Not just in Montana, not just in New York City. We can't build one. Now the chamber right now, the U.S. Chamber is in the middle of litigating that. But the real question is, if they're successful, and I will tell you they probably will be, because the Clean Air Act that was passed in 1969, that everyone still champions, for good reason, kind of allows for it. And this was the ultimate conclusion of what was anticipated in 1969. I would argue that it doesn't fit in right now any longer. I mean, we're at a point now where our air is exponentially cleaner than it was 40 years ago. More importantly, strategically, we can't ignore coal. But the question is right now is EPA's next step not only ban the future of coal-fired power plants, but to force the closure of the existing ones. That's already happening. I mean, they're not requiring it, but utilities have little choice but to make premature decisions, uneconomical decisions, to close facilities now, knowing what the writing on the wall is. Renewables are very, very much uncertain right now. Specifically, you look at the electricity side, wind and solar. No other single factor matters more to both of those two forms of electricity generation than the existence of a federal tax credit. And right now, on the wind side, the production tax credit is set to expire at the end of this year, along with a bunch of other things, not the least of which the Bush tax cuts and several other tax provisions that have created this fiscal cliff concept that has frankly got much of the country scared, myself included. But whether or not wind continues to survive and thrive, especially in places like Big Sky country where it is so dense and frankly can be utilized so easily, really relies on that production tax credit. Right now, investment in new wind builds has ground to literally zero, not knowing whether or not that tax credit is going to be extended. This would be the third time in the 20 plus years that this tax credit has existed that it would expire, and every time it expires, or frankly even gets close to expiring, investment goes down to zero, because people invest in it to make money. They don't necessarily invest in it to generate electricity any more than they invest in an auto dealership to sell cars. Investors come in and want to make money. Without that production tax credit, they can't make money. Therefore, the influx of money isn't there. Right now, very much big question. And then the banana seed company. Everyone talks about or has heard of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, it's evolved. I mean, the environmentalists and the NGOs in this country have organized and are much more, much better funding than they did even 5 years ago. And it's evolved from NIMBY to banana, which is to build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And that's very, very much the case. I mean, if you can't bring a pipeline across an international border where one country knows that it's or thinks that it's a no-brainer, and the people in all the states where it's about to come through, are craving these jobs, and it's the greatest shovel-ready project that is available at a time when we need jobs more than ever, and we still can't build it. I mean, that is the proof positive of the shift from NIMBY to banana. I'm going to quickly go through a couple things to point out sort of where we are. Colors don't do so well here. This is where we get our energy from. This is where the government projects we're going to get our energy from. The line in the middle there is roughly now. It's actually 2010, but it's the most recent statistics we have. And if you squint really hard, you'll see that not a whole lot changes. I mean, overall, going forward to 2035, we expect about a 10% increase. But you'll see renewables get kind of bigger. We expect there to be more biofuels because there is a mandate in place. Refiners have to blend ethanol whether they want to or not. We see, ironically, they suggest natural gas isn't going to expand a whole lot. I think that's kind of preposterous given the amount of gas we're producing right now, but this is where the government sees us going. And they also show coal being roughly equivalent to what it is now, at least as a ratio. They don't take into account all of these clean air and clean water regulations that EPA is promulgated or is about to promulgate. And I would argue that if and when those things come to pass, we will see that coal portion shrink considerably to the country's detriment. We're in election season. Most of you know that. You're bombarded by television ads in the Senate race and other races every night. I would argue that as a country, we vote our pocketbooks, and that's especially true on energy issues. We look over the last 5 years, this is the per capita or per family amount that the average family spends on energy. And I put this up there to show that it's consistently increased over the last 5 years. Now, we don't have official 2011 numbers yet, but sort of back of the envelope calculations show it's actually going to be over $4,000. So it keeps going up and up. That makes people focus on these issues. And people don't necessarily understand the issues, so they just know they're paying a lot more, and they want it to stop. Quit. These are two poll questions asked by a polling entity, the Pew Charitable Trust. It's not exactly a friend of oil and gas per se, but it proves my point. This first question asked 2011 and 2012, a year apart. It's a false choice, but it sort of shows where people are coming from. The first one is, should we be focusing more on alternative approaches to energy like renewables, wind, solar, hydrogen? And the second one is, do we need to really focus on traditional sources, expanding our access to oil, gas, and coal? And you see in 2011, it was basically 2 to 1. We need to go towards the alternative side of things. We fast forward a year later, after suffering some of this pocketbook beat down, and now it's shifted considerably. It's still, this is the beginning of this year, it's still a majority looking to move towards renewables and alternatives. Again, this is a false choice, but you see that the gap is closed considerably. And then you move down to the second question, the support of offshore drilling. The first part in June 2010, that was 2 months after the Macondo blowout in the Gulf of Mexico, where 11 people died, and somewhat in the neighborhood of 6 million barrels of oil were released into the Gulf. Very visual, we all saw it, it was on TV every single day. Very arresting. 2 months later, should we expand offshore drilling? No, of course not. 52% said no, 44% said yes. 2 years later, 2 short years, where we're still reminded of it, we still see it on there, but maybe our memories get shorter and shorter as our news cycles get shorter and shorter. 2/3 of the country support expanding offshore drilling. 2 to 1. If you would have told me at the time, while we were sitting there watching the coverage, that 2 years from now, you're going to have 2 to 1, which is actually an all-time high. That was higher than before Macondo happened. That 2 to 1 support, I would have said, you are crazy. But again, this is why. People understand they're paying a lot. They don't necessarily understand why, but you tell them more domestic oil, they support it. Now, if you remember anything that I tell you, please remember this. It's something that I don't necessarily even preach up here because this is a huge energy country, whether it's territory, I should say, whether it's oil, coal, or gas. Folks up here kind of understand this much better than in most places in the country. But we are not an energy poor country. I don't care if you're 5 or if you're 95. We've all been indoctrinated to believe, and part of it was based on the fact at the time, that we are an energy poor country, that we consume and we don't produce, and that we need to change that. Whether or not we need to change it, I'll leave that for another day. But what I want to talk about is the fact that we are not poor, we are very rich. If you look at what our technically recoverable resources are, meaning what we know, what geologists have gone out and have confirmed is in the ground, and confirmed that we have the technology to bring out, we have almost 500 years of coal. We have over 200 years of oil and about 120 years of natural gas. That's a lot. Now you hear sometimes, especially in the political debate, well, we only have 2% of the world's known oil reserves and we consume 20% of the world's supply. Well, technically true, it's actively dishonest because it doesn't take into account what we know is there, what we know we can get out. Proven oil reserves is a term of art, and we can't include areas like the vast majority of our offshore as proven oil reserves because we can't even go out there and explore for what's there. We can't even use seismic graphing to know what's there because it's been off limits for 25 years. So when people say that, they're trying to game the system. These are facts. These are from the federal government. So it's not just the U.S. Chamber trying to create propaganda out there. We have almost 500 years of coal that we can get at right now, but we're walking away from. In-place resources. These are resources that we know are there, but we probably don't have. Well, we don't have the technology quite yet to get them out of the ground. We may, 10 years from now, we may not. 10,000 years of coal, 500 years of oil, almost 600 years of natural gas. This is not an energy poor country. We are the largest energy country in the world. And I'll show you in a second here, we're probably going to be the largest producer of oil in the world in a few years. We already are the largest producer of natural gas right now, and we already are the largest producer of coal right now. But it's happening in spite of the federal government. Those top 2 lines that are green, if you can see it, that's production on oil and gas on private and state lands over the last 4 years. The bottom one, the blue ones, is production of oil and gas on federal lands. You see one is going up, you see one is going down. When this extends out to 2012, it's going to get even more pronounced. The numbers at the top are going to get even steeper, the numbers at the bottom are going to get even steeper going the other way. This is to say that we are producing more oil and producing more natural gas in spite of what the federal government is doing. It's becoming more and more difficult to get access to these resources on federal lands. is becoming much more prudent for industry through private lands. Now, this wasn't the intention when the federal government started restricting access, but it's a wonderful economic serendipity that industry finally said, you know what, let's just try this private land stuff. It's kind of messy because we have to deal with millions of different landowners, but we can at least deal with them. We can at least get access to their resources if we come to an agreement, if we can bargain. And that's what we see right now. Okay, I'm just going to quickly to shale. You may or may not have seen this map, but I just saw on the Billings Chamber map, you see sort of the regional overlay. These are shale formations throughout the entire country. The beauty of it is they're everywhere. This isn't just the oil patch of Texas, Louisiana, or Oklahoma. This is Ohio. This is North Dakota. This is Tennessee. And it's real. It's happening right now. These plays are being explored. Sometimes it's natural gas, sometimes it's oil, sometimes it's in between. But we are producing domestic oil and gas like we've never produced before, in spite of not being able to produce any of it on federal lands. Here's the offshore red areas, no access whatsoever. Blue areas, some access. To the extent that you can't see it, the only blue areas are right there in the central and western Gulf of Mexico. Everything else off limits has been off limits for 30 years. Okay, what has this development done? Well, I'll be honest, there hasn't been a lot of good quantitative information put out there yet, partially because it's happening so fast and it's happening in such a major way. The 23rd of October, we, along with some of our trade association partners in DC, will be publishing what I hope to be the sort of seminal economic analysis that shows what oil and gas, unconventional oil and gas production has done for this country by way of jobs, by way of growth, by way of tax revenue, and also show where we're expected to go. That will include both oil and gas. There's been some that are just oil, some that are just gas, this state or that state. This will be the first national look, and then later on in November, it will go state by state. I think what we'll see is very, very large numbers. The same entity who's doing this for us, the same firm, did a study that came out last January and showed that the natural gas shale development has already produced 600,000 jobs. The president likes to use that number. It's a very real number. Our number is going to update that. It's going to be larger. But what we're seeing right now, the preliminary numbers that I have, is that the oil jobs are at least twice as large as the natural gas numbers. I mean, this has been an economic driver. It's been a jobs driver. Over the last 5 years, oil and gas alone has seen a 35% increase in employment. The rest of all non-farm jobs have declined by 3.5%. Oil and gas up 35%. Everyone else is down to 3.5%. Last year alone, all 10% of all jobs were created in oil and gas. This is an economic driver. And ultimately, what I think probably the most profound impact is the energy security benefits. This is U.S. oil production, historically, going back to 1960. You see over there on the left-hand side, we peaked around 1971 and had a gradual decline since then. Well, about 3 years ago, it kind of bottomed out, and we started to gradually pick up as the shale production was moving forward. This is a projection done by a firm called Medtech out of Colorado, which I think is very accurate, but until we have our own numbers, unfortunately, use someone else's. What they're showing is between now and 2022, our domestic oil production is going to double. That's a lot. We're going to blow past our all-time high in about 5 years' time. This is happening quickly, and it's happening significantly. And the concept of North American energy independence, it's not a political slogan, it's real. This is the same firm. This is U.S. oil supply, meaning all the oil that we get, no matter where it's from. To the extent that you can see it, the bottom shade is blue, that's what we produce ourselves. The orange is what we get from Canada, and the black on the top is what we get from everyone else. That red line tracks the amount that we, or the percentage that we get from everyone else. You'll see going forward, as we produce more, and as we get more from Canada, by definition, we squeeze out what we get from everyone else. And this entity, an independent analysis firm, they don't pay you to do this. They actually put this stuff out there for people like Wall Street to buy. What they're showing is by 2022, non-Canadian imports will be down to less than 5% of our total supply. That's real. And that's happening in spite of the federal government. It's happening on its own. So while there will be discussion of this, and the government, people at the federal level may or may not take credit, this is happening, and it's real, and it's a great thing. One of our 2 campaigns, Matt talked about Partnership with New America. I work on our other campaign called Share Works for Us. And generally what we do is, right now we're focused in 4 states. We're in Pennsylvania, New York, West Virginia, Ohio, and moving west, not just east. We're moving west to Colorado. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to educate the public that you guys have been bombarded about whether or not fracking is safe, and obviously it's happening up here too, obviously with Billing. A lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation. But what we're trying to do is show, look, in spite of all this discussion, this is a legitimate debate to be had. I think it's pretty clear once you look at the facts, but legitimate debate. What people don't hear are what the economic benefits are. How about all these thousands of jobs that are being, millions of jobs that are being created, the billions of dollars in tax revenue that coming in. So what we're doing is we're finding success stories. We're finding companies and businesses who are benefiting from shale development in those 4 states. And specifically those who aren't in the oil and gas industry. Because a lot of people think, well, of course there's going to be benefit, but it's oil and gas. They're going to benefit. Well, what people don't understand is it's also the retail industry. It's also the manufacturing sector, which is seeing a major renaissance here. And we're seeing major manufacturers come back for the first time in 5 or 6 years. That's where our campaign is focused on. We're moving west quickly. I'm not sure we're necessarily ever going to be in a place like Wyoming, because even though you guys have some spats here, if you will, and there's some disagreement, you can have some organized environmentalists out here. Our work is really focused on areas like Pennsylvania, where they're not used to energy production. I mean, in spite of their long history, they're very scared of energy and any energy production because nothing's happened there in so long. They're more susceptible to believing some of that misinformation. So believe me, we'll be national soon, but right now we're focused in the areas that need it most, so don't take it personal that we're not spending as much time in Wyoming as Matt is in Keystone. And with that, I think we'll switch to the Canadian perspective. Thank you very much for your time.
He left it, that left me the clicker. There's these slides, most of them should be on these little thumb drives if you want to have them. If not, my small presentation's on there. I don't know, but Christopher should be. If it's not, we'll email it to you if you'd like to share it with you. I know we often get asked questions. And if we're asking you to share it with people, we're going to make this permission development. One thing I want to keep in mind before Stan gets up and what Christopher is talking about, it's really, really important to recognize, and you see it here, but in Montana, but in the last, the conversation's changed so dramatically in the energy sector about innovation. And when you talk in Washington about innovation, you hear the president and other politicians talk about innovation, they talk about it in terms of renewables and wind and solar and battery technology and things. And people don't often think, and I have 2 teenage sons, and they come home from school and they're talking about all these things, and they don't recognize, and this is what we have to continue to remind them, those same innovations that are happening in one sector are happening in another part of the same sector. The same innovations that people are investing a lot of money in and those important alternative energies, there's a tremendous amount of innovation in investment that's happening in oil and gas and coal sector. And we can't stop that. We have to continue to move forward. And those are what's enabling us to recognize these benefits that we're talking about today. And it's important that you communicate that to people, that all this shale development, all this new benefit, we've known those resources have been in the ground. We just haven't been able to get at them. And it's only in the last 10 years that we've married old technologies with new ones, and we've looked at new innovations, and we've been able to find ways to get these resources out. And that's not going to stop. These new ways to extract coal, to use carbon capture and storage, to find clean coal technologies, to utilize natural gas in different ways, to find markets. You know, we're still on the front end of the bubble, and you know, we have people promoting new ways to perhaps export coal, to export natural gas, to perhaps build the vehicles that can use natural gas and much more efficiently in a grander scale. So keep that in mind. It's a real good positive message to be talking about, things that you can share. That we're on a fast track, and it's happening very quickly, and it's pretty amazing. And it's game changer. So with that, Stan, you ready?
Okay, yeah.
Are we all set up?
We're pretty lucky today because all my slides are somehow stuck on that computer. This just goes to show you, never use an old computer with some sort of a program that you paid a guy 25 bucks to put in there because then you take it and it doesn't. So this is off the top of my head, and even though I discovered something out of history, this doesn't look anything like that I had last night. So I have no idea what exactly we're on the slides at this point, but this is probably good because I think we're over. So I'll just kind of give you the fast overview on what I'm thinking when I do. See, I'm with the Canadian Consulate down in Denver. I'm American. You can probably tell from my accent. Most of us are. People who work for the Canadian government, the U.S. are Americans. It's very few the Canadians that they let stay down here these days because Prime Minister Harper is very intent. He's going to close the budget deficit. So really, we should send realistic. It's great. Less than 2 years, so we're cutting way back and closing things down and then hiring more people. So that's good. I cover oil and gas in the Rocky Mountain states, which basically is everything from the border right down to Mexico, and also the state of Kansas, which you quite understand that there is a fair amount of gas over there as well. So what I do is I just talk to companies right here, what's going on down here in the United States, gas companies or anything that are vaguely related to it, and match them up and try to make sure that I know what's going on in Canada and be able to put together some sort of meeting service. So I guess what I was going to talk about today is I want to just say more or less what's going on in Canada. And as I said, I'm not Canadian, so you can probably take a lot of it and just say it's not going to make any sense. But the one thing is that as I'm not Canadian, I probably have to look at it harder and understand what goes on. That doesn't mean it's right. I think that from what we're seeing these days up in Canada, things have changed in the last 18 months, particularly the Keystone controversy has sort of changed a lot of people's attitudes toward the energy trade between the United States and Canada. And there's actually been probably, from my perspective, a good kicking the backside to the Canadian public and the Canadian politicians moving forward and doing what they probably should have done quite a while ago. And as Americans, sometimes it's easy that's bad for the United States, but on the other hand, I've got a big love for Canada as well, and it's good actually for North America. I think actually it'll help both countries out in the long run. So basically, I'll just do right.
Talking about exporting the West, yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on in Canada right now is we've got the big, as Children mentioned, down here we have a lot of shale that's come on recently since the downturn, and we have massive production of it. In the past, there's something like close to 17-20% of our supplies in the United States are being filled by Canadian gas production. With all the gas that's going on down here now, that's actually dropping really, really quickly. So that's starting to back up in Canada. From the oil side, you're seeing more or less the same thing, but it's not probably as bad at this point. We've got massive reserves up in Alberta and Lido as well that's coming out of a couple of the provinces of the West, and the natural place for it to go and where all the pipelines go is down into the Midwest, and now we're pushing it into other areas in the U.S. as well. But what's happening here, and I think that we mentioned this before, is that the United States is producing more and more of its own oil, and we actually have a declining demand going on as well. How quickly this is going to happen seems kind of unrealistic. People see millions of barrels of demand drop in just a few years, but theoretically it can happen. The bottom line for Canada is that they have to watch out for their own backside. We've got all this production that's really coming on in Canada, or is coming on in Canada, and the pipelines are down here. There's no place for it to go if we have a lot of domestic production coming on here. So what's happened with the Keystone pipeline is it was business as usual. I'd say a few years ago, everybody just thought we would expand the pipes and we'd just send it down to Houston or wherever where they had the capacity and the right kind of plants to be able to process the heavy Canadian oil. But with pushback we've seen from the government and particularly from the environmental groups, it's actually woken up the Canadian public and particularly the Canadian government as to what needs to be done. So what happened after the Keystone decision back beginning of the year is that the federal government and a lot of the provincial governments were pretty forceful on a Canadian saying I would have actually loved to have been in some of those closed door to hear what the reaction was, but I'd almost bet my money is that they knew it was going to happen, just like reading the tea leaves. But they didn't, in typical fashion, I think that they wanted to believe that nothing would happen until the meeting was over. So the reaction was is that, you know, say the heck of the United States, they more or less did that in Canadian terms, but they also were very clear, saying we're pivoting toward Asia, sort of like our American defense policy pivot toward Asia. The Canadian energy policy, same sort of thing. Let's build those pipelines over the West Coast and just send all we can to China because we no longer is brought into light that it's a security of demand issue. There's just not enough. You can't depend on the American market. One, it's accepting goal. Number two, it's everything going to be there long term. Just regular demand fall off as quickly as it's predicted. So the interesting thing that's happened though is that when with Keystone, a lot of this stuff, it started out first from the environmental perspective, is that they attacked the oil sands on global warming issue. And I don't know what happened there. Washington probably could say a lot more than that, but I have a sneaky suspicion it's just me saying that somebody said that's not fair, and that there will probably be some repercussions on some levels. I have no idea, but I would assume that the United States is sort of saying we're going to look at your greenhouse gas content and sort of make your LCA analysis before telling you what's going on. They just never sort of died. I have no idea. But what happened was his focus dropped from being purely a climate change issue to changing toward pipeline issue. And that seems to be the model for the environmental movement right now. So it didn't work. It worked in the United States, and it's now the same sort of how would you say campaign is happening in Canada to stop pipelines. The same thing is happening against coal to stop the export terminals. So, despite the fact that Harper and the Prime Minister and other people in the government want to get these pipelines over to the West Coast as quickly as possible, and even actually going to even bring new laws to expedite, which is something I can't remember what you call it, Bill 30C, where they rewrote basically the environmental laws to be expedite major projects. There's been massive opposition both from the province and from the First Nations and anybody else that really is connected to the environment in British Columbia. And the interesting thing is that the same sort of result looks like it's happening in Canada, is happening in Keystone. Because I would have said that when Daryl Hannah and people were changing themselves to the White House defense, that was just not going to do anything for years. But in the long run, it did. Maybe there was other stuff behind it, but it's 1,800 miles away. That's what we're talking about. In Canada, what was seemed to be a slam dunk, and I would bet money on it 2 years ago, these pipelines would be approved going forward, is that there's a lot of opposition to them now, and the federal government seems to be, instead of like full speed ahead with written laws, that they're slowly backing away. That doesn't mean they won't be built. However, they're losing such political capital by trying to push them through, is that it's going to be a lot more of a slog than we thought it was going to be. The problem is, or just looking at what's going on in Western Canada in particular, is everything's okay right now. You've got, you're able to get out of oil, you're basically sending it to the United States. You're sending an increasing amount over to the West Coast, although it's still not constrained by one pipeline. From your gas end of it, is that you're basically the same situation as down here. Dry gas drilling is very little, and you've got anything that's wet or liquid up in the BC and northwestern Alberta up in there. It's going to start to back up. Prices are low. You can't get it down here and make a good return. So they're in this rock and a hard place. They've got to get these pipelines built, both for oil and for gas. And the problem is that if you have environmental people or anybody that's against these things, they're able to slow them down for a number of years. You could lose your market. And the market obviously is no longer going to be the U.S. Given what I just said about decline in demand down here, and just the regular pushback. But also that really screwed up my train of thought. Anyway, the market is China and Asia. That's what everybody, and it's the same thing for coal or anything else. It's over there on the West Coast. However, there's competitors in these things. I mean, particularly from the gas side, you've got the Australians that are developing their coal seam gas, and you've got the Qataris or the Qatarites, whatever you want to call them these days, that are just building massive manufacturing facilities and sending it to China and Japan. And then you have the long run, which I don't quite have a handle on, which they've got their own shale gas over there. Everybody, we keep hearing people over their minds saying, oh, China's going to develop the shale so quickly, things are going to change really quickly. And you see Other people say, well, they don't have the infrastructure. It's all out there in the mountains of Tibet or something. We'll never be able to get it out. So who knows what that is, but that's still looming in the background. There's the China pit look. So the upshot for Canada is they have to get this stuff out. They need to get it out quickly or else the market's gone. And then they're stuck with massive amounts of oil and gas that backs them. And it's up in the air. It's bad for the Canadian oil and gas market, which is bad for the Canadian economy, given oil and gas. And mine, I guess, is the real driver of the Canadian economy. So anyway, that's really what I wanted to say. I guess one thing, just to back up a little bit on it, because I wanted me to talk about a little bit on this whole thing from the environmental regulatory side of it. I think it's very interesting is that this is the beauty of a parliamentary process, is where you have, especially when you have majorities, you can basically do sort of what Obama did back in the yes, you just ram it through and nobody really even cares. They care, but they can't do anything about it. So back this spring, the way the government came forward with a bill, they're calling it see something or other 38, but basically it was a rewrite of our clean energy, the Environmental Act, Clean Water Act, and all nine yards. And it's kind of interesting because when you read these things, they sound pretty reasonable. But the main thing that's attracting the resource industries would say a timeline of 2 years, where you have to basically get all the environmental assessments and everything done. That's a good decision. That basically, I believe, was in response to what they were seeing immediately right after Keystone. And on the other hand, on the backside, is dealing with the McKinsey pipeline, which has been something like 25 years, which is supposed to bring gas from the Arctic down to the rest of North America. It never happened because basically opposition from the First Nations and you had. So it took forever, finally got approved, and now no one wants the gas because we got shut. So rewriting all these environmental laws is supposedly going to expedite these pipeline processes, building these pipelines and getting the West Coast to it's interesting because it's sort of like a mirror on what goes on in the U.S. is you're seeing the same people, and they may not necessarily disagree with them, but a lot of it sort of runs roughshod over, at least this is what the environmental people would say, it runs roughshod over public input. It takes the laws and sort of what the opposition says. People that are in favor of it say, well, it creates jobs because it's going to get stuff done and we need it to the economy. So where that leaves it, I don't know. It just it's very interesting to look at what's going on in Canada from this perspective, and what goes on down here is sort of mirrors themselves. But different systems will remain, you can see how it works out. And the thing I go back to again, though, is that people make enough noise, like they always do, but they can't have any input, and that's what we're seeing right now, despite the fact that these new environmental Bill C-38 has been lost since the end of July. The government is sort of stepping back a little bit, so public input still matters. It's probably good. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say, because we're probably before we move forward. Okay.
Covers just about an hour, but we're happy to take questions from any of you and encourage conversation. So.
The energy tax credits that are due to expire at the end of this year.
Yeah.
They would really make a big difference for extracting resources if they went away, or if they leveled the playing field instead of having wind, solar in particular, getting such huge, and the rest of it is storm.
Chris may be able to spend this real quick, but at the chamber, we represent those industries as well, and we promoted that in the past, like offshore deep water and other sorts of extractive industries along the way, there have been specific tax credits that enable those industries to get up. But when you examine in the current budget situation, the tight budgets that we have, in the long term, the length of the term that some of these tax credits have been in place, that while we promote that they have a benefit, that they do need to sunset, and that they do need to have industries that have to be able to stand their own and be function in the marketplace. So we don't have a top dead date that we promoting at the chamber, but we do promote that there should be something. And it also creates certainty for other industries. There has to be an understanding that their competitors in the marketplace are playing by the same rules, and they have to be some of the same sorts of market impact by price that their industry has to.
Well, what you're talking about is the hyperbole, which I'm positive you were hearing it tonight, about eliminating the $4 billion in subsidies the oil and gas industry gets. Those are not going to go away. They will not go away unless there is a legitimate, holistic discussion of all tax reform. They're not going to go away because they're not subsidies. I mean, every business is treated, has expenses you can deduct, and is treated a different way. I mean, if you sell widgets, when you invest in a machine that builds widgets, you get to expense that. If you are extracting from the ground, you are slowly reducing your inventory, and so you expense that. Now, some folks who don't like oil and gas have taken the saying that's a subsidy. Well, that's a subsidy that every single business in this country is subsidized, and they're subsidized to the extent that they're not paying 100% marginal tax rate. It's just academically dishonest. The stuff that I was talking about earlier are actual subsidies, and we, like Matt said, we very much support them. I mean, there are nascent technologies that are beneficial for this country to be diversifying our energy portfolio. Nascent technologies need help, and I mean, we don't talk about it a lot, but our national laboratories are phenomenal. We spend billions of dollars a year on developing the world's energy systems of tomorrow. Now, those guys in their white lab coats and their pocket protectors, they're really good at developing those things. What they're not good at is figuring out how to get them into the market. And it takes us as Americans and as humans, it takes us multiple generations to adopt these things. I mean, it literally took 25 years to see a switch from horses to cars. And it's going to take us some time to do that, which is why we support things like the production tax credit for wind. I don't think there needs to be a false choice. There doesn't need to be a, well, if you do this, then you can't do that. I mean, there's room for both of them. There's room for both of them in the tax code. And the last thing we want to do right now is raise taxes on anyone.
Just to complete the thought, and it relates to some of the other things we were just talking about. Stan brought up this regulation change that just happened in Canada, and there's a lot of focus and a lot of investment going on in natural resource development there. There's a lot of other recent regulation change. This past summer, they passed a law that says when you consider what we're talking about with Keystone XL pipeline, if you consider what happens with offshore wind in Cape Cod, where they've been waiting 8 or 9 years to get some of those wind farms built, or what's happened in North Dakota. North Dakota was supposed to be the OPEC of wind, and they've never been able to build the infrastructure needed to distribute that electricity. Canada looked at this and what's happening in the United States and in their own country and said, if you can apply for a permit that goes across provinces, or is seen as a needed a federal permit, it's a 2-year window. You're a business, and you're come with $7 billion or $10 billion to invest in some sort of infrastructure. Okay, we're going to agree that we're going to get all your permitting done in 2 years. Those are the sorts of things that we need. Those are the sorts of things that also that would help the wind industry. It would help with the biofuels industry. So it would help with some of the other renewable resources, just as much as it would help with the natural gas distribution, oil distribution as well. So just as another highlight, the tax credits are important, but there's other challenges that all these energy industries are being hampered by, and need to have some focus on as well. We'll defer to the mayor first.
You're such a nice guy.
It may be a constituent issue, I don't know.
Oh, he's a great person. Well, I'd like to begin, if I may. Thank you, Steve, Lucita, John, local chamber, and all of you chamber representatives for putting this together. The significance here is just beyond belief. Energy development, whether it's the past, the present, or the future, we all know is extremely important. Each and every one of us, our businesses, the future of Billings, the region, and certainly the country. And thank you, Matt, Chris, and Stan for being here also. What you described, what I'm seeing here is the importance of coalition working together when it comes to policies, regulations, having to do with EPA. That could be an all-day conversation beginning with the EPA, so we won't go there. But, in the past, what I've seen is what the chamber locally has done for us, and then state chamber and on the national chamber organizations. And this requires minimal discussion. I can't see any way around not supporting the PFA, what it would do for us in the future years. I guess the way I look at it, just consider it important for the future. Very good information. What you portrayed up here, the information you shared, sorry you're working at the same time. Is critical. It's critical. We've heard it again and again and again. And we need to open our eyes and take advantage of what's going on. great presentation. I think it's something that benefits huge.
Thank you. And I think if you, the takeaway, we have all these resources, and we do need this all-of-the-above energy policy, and more projections as the innovations are coming online, and they're becoming more efficient and cleaner. But Christopher showed that gap just on oil and gas, the opportunity to electricity and other sorts of things, to be exporters of energy is a great opportunity in this country. And there's more and more think tankish, much smarter people than I am are putting together these projections that are saying that energy self-sufficiency in North America, between Canada and the U.S. and what we have together, we could be there. And that's a huge statement. And any of us who remember that all the sorts of things that have happened since the 70s and in the past, and even going back to World War II with we're seeing when Japan jumped in to build their energy restrictions. It's had a huge impact on us on the globe. So.
Yeah, my question is regards to tax policy and your positions on that, because I look at these numbers on tax incentives, and I think it's become apparent here recently that a lot of the subsidies we've done have actually subsidized industries outside the United States, and the solar and wind, there's more of that we're consuming, that we're getting incentives for, and they're not even being produced here. And I just think that doesn't make good sense.
Well, I mean, I think that's fair, but by the same token, I mean, we certainly believe in free trade. I mean, it's fair to say that if we're embracing federal policies that promote the use of solar and wind technology, more and more of those types of materials are being produced abroad, specifically in China. They've done a very good job at cornering the market, partially because they have access to certain minerals that the rest of the world doesn't. But having said that, I don't think we, certainly as a chamber, want to see restrictions placed on trade that treats a good differently that's created in California versus one that's created in China. Because ultimately, it's the utility who's invested in that. And in order for them to make a good investment, they need to be able to use the materials that they can get as cheaply as possible. Now, sometimes that means it's being bought abroad, but right now we're finally starting to see the flip side of that, which is because of our glut of natural gas, we are our manufacturing sector is actually moving towards net export for the first time in 40 years. We have such a competitive advantage because natural gas is so cheap in this country over the rest of the world. The rest of the world uses oil predominantly, uses the molecules within oil for their plastics and their fertilizers and their petrochemicals. We use the same molecules but in natural gas, and our natural gas is so much cheaper right now. The companies that have been outsourcing for the last 15 years, the 1.5 million jobs we lost in our manufacturing sector over the last 15 years, not only because natural gas got so high, but also labor costs got so high, they're coming back. Right now, there's $70 million in petrochemical investments on the table as far as new facilities. So free trade, it's a two-way street. We want to see our stuff exported, not just the raw energy itself, but the materials we use the energy for, but also to some extent we want to be able to have cheap goods. And frankly, because of natural resources and also very, very cheap labor, China can produce solar arrays much cheaper than we can. And we're seeing the companies who produce them in this country go bankrupt because of that.
We've been at this for a while, so we appreciate your time. Is there any other questions? Can we appeal one more time for you to consider joining the partnership, or we'd just be willing to check our website out on occasion to get some information? We just released a really neat study yesterday that looked at, we started one 2 years ago, looked at from an energy security standpoint, whether we were more secure or less secure than we had been in the last 40 years. And from that, we just released one yesterday and looked at whether we were more secure, less secure compared to other countries globally, where other countries were pretty good. We finished with about 7. So we do some neat studies and some neat information, but we also try to build these campaigns to get businesses engaged and to get you more involved and become better energy advocates. Again, if you do join, we'll just ask that you receive our information and perhaps on occasion send a letter to the White House or sign a petition. Or we've actually brought a gentleman in last fall from South Dakota who was part of the partnership. He's an office supply store owner who came in to testify at a hearing for the Senate Labor Committee. We brought him in. He had a lot to say about what the impact of Keystone XL would have on this community. So we want to help you out. We want to be a resource for you, and we hope that you're willing to work with us. So, and thanks for all coming, and thanks for listening to us, and please let us know how we can help you out.
And I don't want to steal Matt's thunder, but
Yeah.
to the extent that you guys have interest in the shale side, please.
Yeah.
We talked about that separately. I mean, I didn't want to necessarily put all the propaganda out because this is a Partnership for America event, but even though we don't have boots on the ground in Montana or anywhere in this region, what we're doing in all the states is getting those success stories and weaving them together as a national narrative that we can use in Washington as we push back against the EPA, as we push back against the Department of Interior, so that they understand how this is benefiting communities and states across the entire country.
Steve said he'd prefer it instead of writing letters, we could all just chain ourselves away.
We're right across the street, so we'll help with water drains.
We have a great caterer, so.
You said that worked, so.
I did see a lot of note-taking and some hurried scrambling to catch it, so in case you missed it, banana, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything, is that correct? All right, good. The EDC and the Chamber do have a comprehensive community plan to position Billings as the energy hub, and we do want to continue to lead that local energy conversation, so please take advantage of all the resources that we do have available. In addition to Steve's website, the best one is probably thinkbillings.com, is that right? The billingschamber.com website. And to get active in your information, it's Energy XXI, right, 21?
That's our org. And then we also, Christopher has a shell works for us, and ours is fuelingus.org.
But you can get to both off of Energy.
You can go to any of that
XXI.org.
Yeah,
Plus learn about coal and taxes and everything else we do collectively as a chamber.
Perfect. And we do have a monthly newsletter in partnership with the EDC and the Chamber, so make sure you sign up for that on our website as well. So, Stan, Christopher, and Matt, thanks for being here.
Thank you.